Hello viewers, welcome back to Saguaro Spotlight. I'm your host Camilla, and today we have a very special guest, all the way from ASU. Please welcome Monica Chada.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm an assistant professor at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. I teach digital media, I research digital media as well as entrepreneurial journalism. And at a time like now when journalism is undergoing such change, to be able to teach these topics is a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great opportunity, and thank you for being here. So what exactly is entrepreneurial journalism?
So when we talk about entrepreneurial journalism, we refer to journalists who have now taken on entrepreneurial roles and started their own websites, more so at the local community level rather than a national level, although you do have some websites such as Politico, Vox, which are these independent news startups, and so when I research or talk about entrepreneurial journalism, these are the folks I'm looking at. I'm looking at those who were into reporting and then suddenly saw that in several communities, especially their neighborhoods, they no longer had local news, and there was this need to inform their communities of important political issues. And so they decided to take matters into their own hands and start their own websites and inform their neighbors, their friends about political issues, civic issues, and thus they take on entrepreneurial roles because not only are they reporting the news now, but they're also running the website. They're looking at advertising. They're looking at the financial aspects of it, and so that's what I mean when I talk about entrepreneurial journalism.
Well, it's awesome that they're trying to reach out to their community in unique ways. It's very much needed now. So tell us, what is it like to teach digital media and entrepreneurial journalism?
It's fantastic, actually, and it certainly keeps you on your toes, partly because both of these topics are constantly in a state of flux. I mean, digital media, there was a time when I started back in 2007, we were talking about Flash, and Flash is no longer a program that is even supported anymore. There was Storify until a couple years ago, which was a new form of storytelling, and that no longer exists. And so when I'm teaching digital media, there are the fundamentals, but at the same time, in a weird way, you're learning with the students all over again because things are shifting. Digital media today is not going to be digital media tomorrow. We are also talking about narrative storytelling now, where you have computer programs that can write a story for you. And how far into the future are we going to be in a situation where you can have a program that can pretty much make a video for you? I mean, you already have apps like that, but it's only a matter of time where everything that we're teaching today could be obsolete tomorrow. So that's exciting. And entrepreneurial journalism, I think, is probably an avenue that needs to be explored so much more. If traditional media no longer have the jobs, then in some instances people will have to go out there and make their own jobs because folks still need to be provided with information. News still needs to get out. News is really an important aspect of somebody's daily life if they want to participate politically and civically in like a informed manner. And so if you don't have that job, you're going to go ahead and create one. And how do you do that? You imbibe an entrepreneurial spirit and you go out there and create a news website.
That's literally how it goes. So I heard that you studied and worked in India, and now you're at ASU, is that right? Okay, well, tell us, what is the biggest difference between the educational system in both cultures?
Oh, it's very different. So in India, when in a weird way, I can only talk to when I was in the classroom, and that was a long time ago. It was very lecture-based. It was there were big classes. There was participation, but not to the extent that we encourage our students here. And it was very lecture from the podium driven. So it was very one-way communication. We always had to give exams at the very end to get a good grade and then move on to the next year. Whereas over here, what I've realized is that students are very they can take charge of their own education. They have agency to do so, and I think that's great. I think it's fantastic that a student comes into class not knowing, but at the same time armed with some kind of background or knowledge about what they want from the class. They participate in it. There is opportunity to get grades by not just exams, but also, you could be good at exams, you could not be good at taking exams, but there are projects, there are other ways of learning. There is encouragement for a two-way communication versus one-way. And as a teacher in the classroom, I've really appreciated that. I think some of my best students are those who have taken charge of their education, brought agency into the classroom, and sort of are really willing. They're sort of leaning forward. They're really willing to learn versus in India, where we were sort of more like, okay, I'm here, now you lecture, then I will go home and I will study, I will answer the exams, and then I'm going to get a good grade. So while there is agency, there's no interaction. There is no sort of effort to go beyond just a very linear way of learning. I think that has been, that's probably the biggest difference. And of course, the biggest difference for me is that you can eat in class, which is something I wish I could do back home in India, but that was not an option for us.
Really? Just you couldn't even snack or anything?
No, you weren't allowed any breaks. I mean, basically, when the lecture's on, the lecture's on. You are in class for about an hour and a half or for as long as the lecture is, and then you get your break.
That's rigorous. I need to snack always. That is super nice. Okay, well, we have one last question before we head on to our break. What is it like being a woman in an educational and journalism industry? Are there any specific obstacles you feel might be in the way?
That's an interesting question. I think when you're in it, you are never really thinking about the obstacles because you're just so caught up with doing things, right? If there's a story that you need to get, you're just focused on getting it. When I worked as a journalist, I really didn't think about gender all that much, although I know that it played a role in so many ways. And it was only when I sort of stepped away from the profession and I started studying it, you sort of go like, oh, yes, that happened to me as well. For example, that the political or the top-notch reporters and editors could go off for their happy hour, but you weren't part of the big boys club. And so you never got that interaction, you never got that participation. So things like that. I didn't feel very different then, but when I stepped away from it, I was like, oh, that was certainly that you're not part of the club where the decisions are made, where the plum assignments are handed out, where the big opportunities are discussed, where you can sort of lay your case for why you're the best candidate for the job. You sort of miss out on that on that complete aspect of it. In terms of educational, I think probably the one thing that that I struggle with is, and especially because I'm a faculty woman of color, I struggle with authority in the classroom. And there's ample research that shows that when there's a female faculty in the classroom, students expect her to be nurturing. Students they expect her to be more. That's right, more understanding. And that's not my personality at all because, well, we are here to work. I was a professional like that. And so that shift was a little bit tricky for me, realizing that I would have to frame my responses, answers, and reactions in a way that is more conducive to their image of me versus just being a professional in the classroom. So I think that has been a difficult transition, but it's getting better every year. I think the good thing about being a woman is that we know resilience, and we know how to sort of figure out what obstacles are going to come in our way and how to deal with them. And so we just adapt better,
Oh,
I
yes.
think. And that's a strength which, after 5 years of teaching, I think I've gotten somewhat better at.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, that is it for our first segment. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Welcome back to Saguaro Spotlight. We are talking with Monica about her career in journalism and digital media. So, Monica, tell us, what made you want to do journalism?
Oh, actually, initially it was a summer holiday where I wasn't traveling, and I needed a summer job. I was in athletics at the time, and my coach was working for a newspaper, and he said, "Well, we're looking for interns. Why don't you come on in?" They realized I could write, and they put me on the paper. And then I remember, because I was very young, I wasn't getting paid very much, and I had a conversation with my mom at the time, who was very concerned about the career path I was going to take, and she was like, "Well, you're going to have to, figure out what you want to do." And I remembered this really distinctly. I remember telling her, "I'm having too much fun to quit." And I really wasn't getting paid very much.
Yeah.
So I figured if there was something that I really wanted to do for free and it didn't matter, then maybe that's the job for me. So that's kind of how I got into journalism.
Okay.
I was having too much fun to quit.
I love that, having too much fun to quit. That's always good energy to have. Well, what was it like working at the Indian Express?
It was a great learning experience because I was one of the youngest in terms of staff. I got exposed to a lot of events, a lot of celebrities, a lot of important political figures. When I was working, I worked for not exactly the main paper, but more like these special pages, which here would be akin to what you would call stories that sort of go with special advertising supplements. But our editor always fought for independence from whatever the ads were. So, for example, we would always get into fights with with our advertising staff because we would write a review where the restaurant was really bad, and we would say it was bad, and then they would come in and say they just like gave a really big advertisement on the page, and my editor would be like, "Well, but it was bad," and then we couldn't have written anything else. And so with those, what that did do was hone my feature writing skill. But more than anything, it sort of exposed me to the going out, reporting on issues, learning about editorial integrity, not being influenced by who's advertising or that there is advertising at all. And so in some ways it was, they were great lessons from my editor in writing, in being objective, and in calling a spade a spade. It is what it is.
It is what it is. That's usually how it is in the industry.
Yeah.
And for our final question, are you still traveling around the world and researching?
Yes, yes, and that's probably the funnest part of research. I just presented a paper in China last year. It was fantastic to be invited on the panel, and there I got to meet some really bright students who were very concerned about how artificial intelligence may influence journalism. I was primarily, the paper that I was presenting examined how narrative writing, which is writing done by machines, or what is also popularly called robo-journalism, could sort of affect local news, and would local news entrepreneurs be interested in trying out this new technology? And the questions I got were fascinating. They were concerned about what does that mean for journalism. They were concerned about what does that mean for them? What does it mean for the kind of news that's going to get out? What does it mean for the writing? And interestingly, a few weeks later, it was a Chinese television channel that actually introduced a robot news presenter. And so in some ways, and so in some ways it was great to be where they are at the forefront of using technology in the newsroom, and talking to students who are going to be a part of this new world. So that was fun. And of course, we always travel out to conferences. I've done some research back home in India, where we looked at news entrepreneurs in India. A lot of the research that we do is primarily related to Western countries, but a lot of it comes out of the U.S. Partly because the U.S. journalism industry is kind of what the world looks up to as, we want to know what's happening in the U.S., and that gives us an indication of what's going to happen with us moving forward. But it was nice to talk to entrepreneurs or journalism entrepreneurs back home in India and get a sense of where do they think journalism is going in the country, because they're trying out new things. And it was interesting to see that they were also looking to American examples. So in some ways I was like, okay, I've done that and I'm doing this. So I kind of know I'm like right in the middle of these conversations. So yes, I do try to get more research from and share my research in other parts of the world, because I think journalism as a whole is going to want to know the answers to common questions.
It is. It's a big part that plays a lot in our life. It really is. All right. Well, thank you for joining us at Saguaro Spotlight. Hope to see you next week with more news. Thank you, and good night, America.